So today we are going to be speaking about the Turpins. So a lot of you probably know about this case, but for those of you who don't, here we go. So Louise Turpin was born in West Virginia. Her family were devout Christians. They didn't drink alcohol or anything like that, and they went to church a lot, and this is actually where Louise met David Turpin. Her dad was actually not happy with the big age gap. She had really strict parents and he was really unhappy with the age gap. So Louise ended up actually moving away with David to distance herself from the family because they weren't accepting of their relationship. Louise suffered sexual assault as a child. The man who sexually assaulted her also sexually assaulted her sister and her mother as well. Her mother was aware of the sexual assault and abuse, however she went along with it for money because the man who was doing it was actually rich and was helping her out financially, and so it was sort of, if you don't let me do this, I'll take my money away sort of situation. Teresa, Louise's sister, actually said that she thought that Louise had the perfect life. She was living in a fairy tale family. She had money and no worries in the world. She said that they seemed like a normal and ideal family. And in 1992, the Turpins actually struggled financially, so they'd never had any problems with money, and then suddenly they did. They actually filed for bankruptcy, and then the abuse of their children began in Fort Worth in Texas. At first it started as neglect, and then it turned into a long abuse. So there was 12 out of 13 of the children that were actually abused, and 8 of them were adults. The 8 adults were aged between 18 and 29. They were often tied up with ropes and chains and tied to their beds. In 1998, this was the last time that Louise's sister Teresa actually saw the family before Louise decided to cut the family off entirely and shut themselves off from the world. Her and David did. They wanted to shut the children off from reality, basically, so that they didn't know any better and they didn't know that they were in such a shit situation, basically. And in 1999, they moved to a rural area in Texas. So the new owners that bought their house actually said that it was horrifying. They said that there was soiled carpets, soiled walls, and they said that the creepiest thing they saw was that there were scratches on the insides of doors, which is obviously where the children have been scratching to get out. When they moved to rural Texas, their neighbours actually found them very suspicious. One of the neighbours, she saw the younger girls playing, and she approached them and asked them for their names because David and Louise Turpin had never actually introduced themselves or their children to the neighbours. So she was just being curious and asked their names. And one of the girls said, well, maybe if you speak to me, you'll figure out my name. And then her sister said, no, don't tell her your name. Like, really telling her, no, don't do that. And apparently she looked terrified and was screaming and shouting about it. So the neighbour also noticed that the girls' hands were clean, but the rest of their body was dirty. She said that it looked like their hands were covered in milk. And that's when she realised that the rest of them was actually dirty and their hands were the only thing that was clean. And when she asked why only their hands were clean, they said because if we go past the wrist, it's wasted in water. So basically the children were only actually allowed to wash their hands and nothing else. It was revealed that the children were only actually allowed to shower once a year. They weren't allowed to shower any more than that, even when they went on holiday. The children were actually only allowed up during the night. So they lived a nocturnal lifestyle as a family. The curtains were always shut at night time. However, the lights were like constantly on, always. And apparently the children had bikes but never rode them. It was revealed that the children, as punishment, were locked in separate rooms. That's probably where the scratch marks came from the old house. And in the rural Texas house, the neighbour was walking and she saw 2 of the young boys actually eating out of a bin, or a trash can if you're American. So they were eating dirty food and rotten food because they were absolutely starving, which raised questions with the neighbours, but they didn't actually say anything. In 2010, one of the young girls actually escaped the house and she ran as far as she could and found a motorist. So somebody was in a car and she asked them for help, basically. They asked her questions and they found that she didn't know who the president was. She didn't know how old she was. They actually ended up driving her back home thinking that maybe she was confused or she was out when she wasn't supposed to be. In 2010, also David lost his job, so they were unable to pay the mortgage. It's believed that Louise had so many children because she loved the infancy stage and loved to feel needed, which is why she made them weak, was so that she could feel needed and that they needed her. So when David lost his job, they actually had to move again. So when they moved, the neighbours took a sneak peek into their rural Texas house, thinking of what had gone on and how suspicious it was. And apparently a load of dogs came flooding out, and they had been living on dirty nappies or diapers if you're American, and rubbish or trash if you're American. Just dirt, just everywhere. Just disgusting. Apparently the bedroom was set up like bunks, and apparently there was like ropes tied to the bed where the children had obviously been tied up, but the neighbours thought that the children had tied the ropes to the bed playing a game. They said it was really strange because the living room was set up like a school, but there was no crayons, there was no toys, there was just like a broken chalkboard, but there was like no chalk really. The children used to get tied up as punishment in their bedrooms, which was what the ropes was about. However, some of them actually learnt to escape from the ropes, hence how the girl got out in 2010. What they did was, instead of not tying their children up anymore, they decided that it would be a better idea to get chains and padlocks and use them instead. In 2014, the Turpins moved from Texas to California. So when they got to California, the abuse intensified. They launched their own school in their own house for their own children to keep them away from society. However, they didn't actually teach them anything. When everything came to a head and the police questioned some of the children, one of the young girls didn't know what medication was when she was asked by a police officer, and most of the children actually didn't know what a police officer was. They had no idea what a police officer was because they'd been shut away from society forever. Just think about that, how weird it would be not knowing all of these things are out there. So the children sometimes wouldn't eat for days. They would be starved by their parents. Apparently they had a really good schedule where they'd have little to eat, and sometimes they wouldn't eat for days. And then, just to rub salt in the wound, the parents decided that they were going to eat pies in front of the children. So they'd bake a pie, put it on the table, let the children gather round and watch them eat it, which is disgusting. They weren't allowed to play with toys, and in 2015 they finally had their 13th child. So this was the last child of the Turpins. So to celebrate, they went and renewed their wedding vows in Vegas with all of their children. In 2016, 6 of the children were adults. So at 6 AM on the 14th of January, one of the younger children, she was 17, she used to make YouTube videos of her singing, and I'm guessing she just got really fucking sick of not being able to do the stuff she wanted to do as a 17-year-old. And so she'd been planning her getaway for 2 years and actually succeeded and finally escaped on the 14th of January. And so she called police on a secret phone, and she was terrified. She said that she was scared that her parents would kill her if they found out that she'd escaped from them. When police actually came to find her, so they came and spoke to her first before they went to the house, they actually thought she was 10 because she was so malnourished. She didn't look like a 17-year-old, she looked like a 10-year-old. So they went to the house and found all the children to be severely malnourished. The oldest child, a 29-year-old woman, she weighed 82 pounds when she was discovered, so that tells you how malnourished they were. The police seized journals that were written by all the children as evidence against the parents. Writing in the journals was the only entertainment that the children had. On March 18th, 9 weeks after being taken into care, the children were moved to a secret rural location. They have been shopping, they have tried ice cream, and they have been to restaurants. So all the things that children should be able to do, they have now done. And they've been loving every second of it apparently, and that's really nice. The youngest children are being fostered by 2 separate families. Louisa's sister Teresa, she wants to adopt 2 kids, and Louisa's half-brother wants to adopt 3 kids. And the only way that the Turpins can actually contact their children is through lawyers. So they were both charged with 12 counts of false imprisonment, 12 counts of torture, 9 counts of child abuse, 7 counts of cruelty with intent to harm. Louise was charged with 1 count of GBH, and David was charged with committing a lewd act on somebody aged 14 or under. They both pleaded not guilty. I don't know how they thought they'd swing that one. And the trial date is actually yet to be set, so we'll probably cover this later on in the year, if not next year, when the trial actually starts, and what look up like what comes from that. So I hope you enjoyed this video, guys. If you did, give me a thumbs up. Let me know what you think of this case in the comments, because to me it seems pretty fucked up. I just don't understand how you can treat children that way, and I don't understand why you'd keep having children until you got 13 if you were going to treat them that way. Let me know in the comments, and I will see you next time.